Congressman Krishnamoorthi, how important were those exhibits in your hearing yesterday?
I think they were very important because they added, some real documentary evidence to corroborate his oral evidence. And, whenever the Republicans kept jumping up and down, screaming that he was a liar, it's very interesting that not once did they, impugn the integrity of the evidence or say that it was somehow false. In fact, it was very hard for them to do so.
And I just want to show the moment that you had yesterday in that hearing, which changed our understanding of what might be happening next in this story when you asked Michael Cohen about any other possible evidence.
Is there any other wrongdoing or illegal act that you are aware of regarding Donald Trump that we haven't yet discussed today?
Yes, and again, those are part of the investigation that's currently being looked at by the Southern District of New York.
Congressman, were you surprised by that answer?
Truthfully, yes. I didn't expect him to answer quite that way. In fact, there was a question right before that question where I actually asked him when was the last time that Donald Trump or one of his agents or advisors reached out to him or communicated with him. And he said it was 2 months after the raid, which is very unusual timing. And then I asked him what was said, and again, he said, I can't tell you. That is under investigation by the Southern District of New York, the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York. And so, again, I think that there's a lot of information that we still don't know. Certainly anything that's under investigation by the Southern District of New York, I would argue, is something that we should be probing as well in Congress.
And Congressman, you were also one of the few who's in the both hearings, the closed hearing today with the Intelligence Committee. What can you tell us about what happened in that hearing, and especially in terms of consistencies with yesterday's hearing or expansions on what you heard in yesterday's hearing?
Unfortunately, I can't get into the details of the testimony, but I can say a couple things. One, he was very cooperative. Two, there was so much testimony that he was able to give on the questions at issue. He's coming back next Wednesday or on March 6th, and that was not expected today. And so I think that just overall, he's been very cooperative. Going back to the oversight hearing, I thought he came across as credible. And if there's anybody who knows the consequences of lying, especially lying to Congress, it's Michael Cohen, because he's in part going to prison because of that. At this point, I don't see any incentive for him to further lie, because that would only increase his sentence, not decrease it.
What was your judgment of his credibility in today's closed hearing?
I didn't see any inconsistency from the open hearing. He just comes across as a liberated person, Lawrence. I think that he comes across as someone who's like, I'm going to prison in 2 months, and all of a sudden that provides some clarity as to what he needs to be doing right now, which is telling the truth and, of course, putting his affairs in order and taking care of his family. David
K. Johnston, you've spent years trying to get documentary evidence about Trump businesses, but you don't have a key to Michael Cohen's basement. So I'd like to get your reaction to the supporting documentation that Michael Cohen brought to that hearing yesterday, and anything else you think we should be focusing on.
Well, that check is absolutely a smoking gun, and I'm glad that Emily Jane has this terrific story. Shows what good reporting is going on here by journalists. By my count, Michael Cohen identified potentially 14 different crimes in his testimony. My concern is that a lot of that, the dots were not connected, and a lot of the examination was very poor. Now, the congressman who's on our panel and 2 other Congress members, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez and Katie Hill from California, asked very pointed questions that and elicited important new information, but way too many of the questions were preening. They were time wasted on telling us what we already know. And I hope that the committees in the future do a better job of examining the witnesses.
And David, all of the things you're talking about are things that it could be subjects of future hearings, obviously.
Oh, and I'm sure we're going to see lots of hearings coming forward, particularly now that Cohen has laid out these 14 at least paths to pursue and to decide which of these are more significant. The financial documents are particularly bizarre in that Trump suddenly doubles his net worth to close to $8.7 billion. Remember, that's the figure he mentioned the day he announced he was running for president almost 4 years ago. And what they show is something I've been showing about Donald, including when I got his net worth statement in 1990. He just makes it up. He just makes it up. There's no reality behind it. By the way, I meant to tell you, Lawrence, I was doing my net worth statement this evening, and I'm worth $7 billion.
Congressman, quickly before we go, I wanted to get reacting off of what David just said in his review of the performance of members yesterday, and people saw what they saw, so I don't want to drag you into defending your colleagues, but I want to go to another point.
Well, I think I did great. I agree with that.
You just got a very good review, but I want to go into the private session in this way. It was always my experience working in the Senate that whenever you closed the door and it was a private meeting, every senator performed better in private than they do publicly. No wasted words. Every single comment I always found when the door was closed was much more efficient, much more pointed, much sharper. Is that true when you have a closed door session, say, of the Intelligence Committee as you did today compared to what we saw yesterday?
Great point, Lauren. When you have those cameras, especially in that open session, I did feel like sometimes when the Republicans talked, it was almost as though they were playing to the cameras. At the start of the oversight hearing yesterday, they interrupted Elijah Cummings not more than 5 words into the hearing to basically move to adjourn or postpone the hearing. And at that moment, I really felt like they were playing to Donald Trump, who apparently was watching live from Vietnam. And so absolutely, when there's a closed-door session, I do think that theatrics goes down, and we actually have a little bit more of a subdued Q&A session.
We can't wait for the transcripts of the closed-door session. Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, David K. Johnston, Emily J. Fox, thank you all for starting us